Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde act in a few, but first, a few deaf beats and rhymes. John Kasich and Cruz say see you later, 11 months after Trump entered on an escalator. After a dozen debates that made him whole, 10 months after leading in his first national poll. 16 rivals tried to stop him. $75 million in ads couldn't block him. Dozens of contests in which he couldn't be beat. And the seemingly infinite late-night retweets. All of these obstacles did Trump outlive. And after Indiana, at last, the billionaire is presumptive. Whew, that's not bad, right? Okay. At this hour, we were waiting for John Kasich to speak in Columbus, Ohio. Mark, we're going to look at what has happened in the last 24 hours from 360 angles and more tonight. But let us start with this. Is this just real life or is it fantasy? How did Donald Trump do this?
I've been asking Republicans over the last couple days, could Trump have been stopped? And I've not heard a single explanation from anybody, given the weakness of the field, given how Trump matched the mood of the party, given the performance that Trump and his team did. I haven't heard anybody give me a scenario that sounds plausible of how Trump could be stopped.
Yeah. I mean, look, once you take the field as set, and then you take the nature of those individuals and how they would choose to compete, unstoppable and inevitable. But I don't think anything's inevitable in politics, ever. And it takes away something from Trump's genius in some ways. The genius, the particular kind of genius that got him to where he is today, against all odds, to say that it was somehow inevitable or foreordained.
If Romney or Ryan had run, they would have beaten him?
I don't know. I don't know the answer. I really don't know. In this climate, but again, just to give Trump credit, you know, you don't have to like any of his policies or anything else to acknowledge the fact that he seized a moment. He understood the ways in which the Republican Party had changed. He read the electorate acutely, and he developed a message that resonated with millions of Republicans that no one else did nearly as effectively as he did. And maybe he could have been stopped, but you got to take your hat off to him in that sense. And I don't think there's anything like that was inevitable about something this unlikely.
If you made a list of all the things you want in a presidential candidate, successful presidential candidate, Trump basically was first or second in every category. He was the best candidate with the best message. And as I said from the beginning, I'll say it again as we close out the Republican nomination fight. This was not the best field that either party had put forward in a generation. It was the most overrated. There was not one person in this field who performed under their skill level. They all performed, I thought, pretty close to their skill level. None of them were this match for Donald Trump.
Well, I'll challenge you on one thing, and I'm not sure that maybe you won't even disagree with this, but there's one area in which I think there is something you want from a presidential candidate that Trump did not exhibit, which is policy expertise, policy innovation. He was not first, second, third, or fourth in that era.
Yeah, I'll say this. Name any idea put forward by any other candidate. They may be more steeped in policy, but none of them presented ideas that caught on with the public.
Oh, that's 100% true. But that 100% true, and that speaks, as you say, correctly to the weakness of the field. But Trump was lacking there. But I think what he understood was that what the audience, his audience and the Republican electorate wanted in this cycle was not innovation in policy, new ideas. What they wanted was someone who understood their sense of grievance about how screwed up the Republican Party and the political system more broadly is.
Yeah, and as we said, John Kasich is standing by, or we're standing by to hear John Kasich in Columbus, Ohio, speak to his presidential campaign, expected to end it tonight. Shortly after Ted Cruz announced in Indianapolis last night that he was dropping out of the race, the chairman of the Republican National Party, Reince Priebus, gave his digital blessing to the new standard bearer of the Republican Party. He tweeted this: "At real Donald Trump will be presumptive at GOP nominee. We all need to unite and focus on defeating at Hillary Clinton. Hashtag never Clinton." There are a lot of leading Republicans like Bush 41, Bush 43, and Dick Cheney that still haven't weighed in on where they stand on Trump, but there has been a fair amount of reaction today spanning a pretty broad spectrum of the emotions and attitudes that exist within the party. On one end, you have Scott Walker, who told reporters in Wisconsin today that Trump is, for him, a better choice than Hillary Clinton. But there are a lot of hedgers already. Senator Susan Collins of Maine told a local radio station, quote, "Donald Trump has the opportunity to unite the party, but if he's going to build that wall that he keeps talking about, he's going to have to mend a lot of fences." Kelly Ayotte, senator from New Hampshire, who faces a very tough re-election battle there, was more hedgier. Her campaign communications director told the New Hampshire union leader that Ayotte, quote, "plans to support Trump, but, quote, hasn't and isn't planning to endorse anyone this cycle." And never Trumpers such as Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse have been pretty blunt. He tweeted, quote, "Reporters keep asking if Indiana changes anything for me. The answer is simple: no." John, a lot of people still left to react, but what does this first round of reactions say about Trump's chances of uniting the Republican Party now as the nominee presumptive?
Just the one quick note, which is that I think those two, Susan Collins and Kelly Ayotte, are clowns in terms of how they're handling this, with this utter wishy-washy talk. You know, if you vote for somebody, you are endorsing them. I don't care what anybody says. That's an endorsement in the actual meaning of the word endorsement. If I vote for you, I have endorsed you. I think it's been notable that there has not been, besides Reince Priebus, today has not been a day in which there have been a lot of loud calls to rally around Trump from a lot of establishment figures.
Almost none.
Almost none. Very quiet. So I think Trump has a lot of work to do still if he's going to actually bring off what he says. He says he's not going to ever unify the whole party. He said today on television there are some parts of the party he won't get and he doesn't want. But he's got an uphill struggle.
You had some conservative bloggers saying never Trump. Bill Kristol said today, late in the day, that he was not going to vote for Trump or Clinton. You're going to see some of that. But most people I've talked to, and based on this initial reaction, elected officials, current elected officials, will be enough on board to not create a problem for him. Some will skip the convention, but he is going to have problem with others. And I think some of that can be solved, though, when and if, as is expected, he starts raising money and helping the Republican Party with a plan for a successful convention, makes a strong vice presidential pick. I think a strong vice presidential pick could go a long way towards uniting the party. And then he's got to have a battle plan for the party for a general election.
It's key that the vice presidential pick, I think it's clear, if he does not see this, he should, that vice presidential pick must be aimed at elites and trying to solve this problem. It's not about voting blocks. It's about this, picking someone who solves that problem. But look, if Mitt Romney, John McCain, George W. Bush 43, George W. Bush 41, if all the living previous Republican nominees are all against him and Bob Dole are all against him, that's not a unified party in any meaningful sense.
Yeah, but he's going to get some of those.
All right, coming up, that surprising loss for Hillary Clinton in Indiana last night. And hey, what happened? We'll talk more about that and more after these words from our sponsors.
Is that a thing? So before last night, Hillary Clinton was on a winning streak. She won in New York and in the other northeastern states that voted, just like Donald Trump. And the media has, for some time, been touting what the campaign calls an insurmountable delegate lead, just like Donald Trump. So Clinton seemed to have Trump-like momentum. She was leading, like Trump, in all the public polls against her rivals in the Hoosier state primary. So, John, What explains Trump winning big but Clinton losing in Indiana?
The fact that the Clinton campaign decided not to advertise in Indiana and made the decision, which I think they may live to regret, in the sense that it may make their next month of their life harder. But they, Bernie Sanders was on the air and on the ground, and they decided that they were going to pivot to the general election and not spend any money on the air at all. None. $0 in Indiana. It's hard to win a contest if you're not on the air.
But they did that in part because their private polling, for the most part, it went up and down. But for the most part, it didn't look like they could win that easily. And it seems like, I mean, we don't know how much money they have left because the cash on hand figures aren't kept up to date. But it seems like, what are they saving the money for? Why not win a state like Indiana? Why not advertise? The Clintons, of course, went there because the Clintons always think they can win. Yeah. But the campaign decided they didn't want to spend the money. Seems not like a big deal because it doesn't hurt her chances. But it does create that second front, as you said, for the rest of the month.
I agree. And, look, there's some sign in the exit polls that that these states in the Midwest where Bernie Sanders has been able to win, state like Michigan, state like Indiana, he's done better with women, has beat her among women voters. Hillary Clinton has done in the ones where she's won. She obviously has won with women voters. In this case, they basically split the women 50-50, essentially, in Indiana. And that demographically, but that doesn't sort of explain really the thing. And I agree with you. I think, as I say, she's going to be the Democratic nominee almost certainly, but she made her life harder by deciding to be parsimonious with her funds there. All right, earlier we talked about Donald Trump's efforts to bring the GOP together, but one looming roadblock on the road to unity is the Clinton campaign's impending effort to identify anti-Donaldista Republicans from a variety of groups. That'd be like Republican women, retired military officers, grassroots activists, and elected officials, and turn them into #ImWithHer defectors. So, Mark, which Republicans do you think are likely to be Brooklyn's ripest targets, and how big of a role do you think that Republicans for Hillary will play in their general election?
My suspicion, and based on some reporting, is the national security ones are going to be a really big deal. You're going to see a lot of retired military diplomats who say they're not with Trump. And that's why I think the Trump folks really would like to pick somebody with national security credentials to be on the ticket, because that would be, if you'll pardon the obvious pun, a Trump card. And then I think you're going to see not a lot of current electeds, but I think you'll see some retired elected officials on the Republican side, maybe some women, who will also be symbolically very important.
One of the things that I think is overstated is the extent to which, and Maureen Dowd did this in a column recently, it's overstated the degree to which Trump is the dove here and Hillary is the hawk here. Trump routinely misstates his position on the Iraq War, which he claims he was never for, even though there's plenty of evidence that he was for it. But I do think that there's some evidence. There's plenty, I think. But in any case, there's no doubt that Hillary Clinton has credibility with military people. I agree with you at this first pass. Military, huge thing for Clinton because she's got a lot of credibility with those folks.
Look, the endorsements don't mean all that much, but I think one of the biggest challenges the Clinton campaign faces, and they know this, is winning news cycles. Having the argument and the discussion in any given day be about what she wants it to be about, rather than what Trump wants to be about, because nobody can take away from him the notion that he dominates the news when he wants to.
The endorsements don't matter that much, but if high-level military people come out keep saying Donald Trump's not fit to be commander-in-chief, that can matter.
At least win a day. All right, as we get closer to a likely general election matchup between a former Secretary of State and a former celebrity TV star, opinions range, even within Hillary Clinton circles, about just how hard it's going to be for her to beat Donald Trump in November. Some think Trump's populist message and unpredictable campaign could pose a real threat. Others are predicting a Clinton landslide. Today, in an interview on CNN, Clinton seemed to be laying out the latter argument.
He says climate change is a Chinese hoax, and I think it's real, and we've got to pull the world together to deal with it. So you can go down a long list, some of which he's tried to bob and weave a little bit, but I think it's a risk. I think he is a loose cannon, and loose cannons tend to misfire.
If he is a loose cannon, though, he's certainly willing to say things during a race against opponents. I mean, we've seen this already, that a lot of candidates were not prepared for on the GOP side. Are you ready for that?
Well, I've sort of been in the arena for 25 years, and I think nearly everything that can be thrown at somebody in politics and public life has come my way.
You feel like you know how to run against him?
Oh, absolutely. But I'm not running against him. I'm running my own campaign.
Later, also on CNN, Trump said he was eager to start focusing on Clinton and the general election.
Been a little flip, and I'm even surprised by it. I thought that I'd be going longer and she'd be going shorter. She can't put it away. That's like a football team. They can't get the ball over the line. I put it away. She can't put it away. So I thought that I'd be out there and she'd be campaigning against me. I didn't realize. So, yeah, I'll be campaigning against her.
All right, so John, going forward, what are the biggest variables that will determine whether Trump can win or whether, as some Democrats believe, this will be a blowout?
Can Donald Trump fix one or both of the following two problems? His historically horrible ratings with female voters and his historically horrible ratings with Hispanic voters. He got to fix at least one of them, arguably both of them. But if he can't fix either, he's done.
Yeah, I think the bigger umbrella over those two things is the fight to define Donald Trump. Is he, as the Clinton people believe and will argue, a horrible person, a man with a dark heart, a man who doesn't represent the best of the United States? Or is he a successful businessman who's a little bit politically incorrect or a lot politically incorrect, but the right person to make change in Washington? I think that fight for definition will speak to not just those groups, but his ability to expand his support beyond the Republican electorate that he's won and the independents that he's won.
Well, I think the argument from the Clinton side certainly starts not with dark heart, but starts with what Hillary Clinton was saying here today. Loose cannon, unpredictable, too volatile, not temperamentally suited to the Oval Office and to controlling the nuclear arsenal, for instance. The second set of things, Donald Trump, with some of the comments he's made in the past, gives a lot of groups in America a sense that he does have a dark heart, and he's going to have to do a lot of work to convince them otherwise, given things that he's already said.
Yeah. Look, it's always a false choice. People say this is a base election or it's a center election. People say it's a referendum on one candidate or the other. This reminds me a lot, in some ways, of the Gore-Bush election in 2000, where the Gore folks said Bush will never be seen as qualified. Right. We will knock him out. We will convince people that he's not up to the job. And they didn't make nearly as much progress on that score as they wanted to. I think the Clinton people believe that they can render Trump unacceptable and unelectable. She's got to prove to people that, she's likable enough, to use the phrase. But a lot of this is going to be, I think, about can Trump pass a bar, get over the bar of being acceptable, and the debates will obviously be widely watched and hugely important.
And one of the big questions, it seems to me, on all these, because we're kind of generally the same, is just will he pay a price for he didn't pay any price with the Republican nominating electorate for some of the controversial things he said. Will he pay a price in the bigger America that votes in a general election? All right, coming up, a look back and a look forward, this dramatic 2016 race, right after this very, very quick break.
Welcome back. Our next guest was #OnWithHer before it was even trending. Joined now by Joel Benenson, the chief strategist for Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Benenson, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Take Donald Trump's name off his candidacy. If he was able to significantly improve his standing with women voters in a general election and Hispanics, what kind of achievement would that be in the annals of politics?
Well, if I had wings, I could fly, too, right? I mean, I don't. I think it's an enormous uphill climb for him because he's extremely well known. It's no mystery to Donald Trump. And the definition that's around him right now is of his own making. This didn't get put on him by any politician, by any opponent. He's created it himself. And so that's the hardest thing to undo, is when you have solidified your image on your own efforts.
It's hard, but is it possible? Do you rule out that he could have standing with women and Hispanics good enough to win? Do you rule that out?
I don't rule anything out completely, but when you look at how this is built up over time and how solidified it's been, if you go back and look at when he first started talking about running for president and the things he's been saying over the last, 4 or 5 years, these ratings have been pretty steady. And the other thing about that will pose a challenge for Mr. Trump, I think, is he's never shown a propensity to be able to work on his own image. He spends most of his time with adjectives, very little substance, and then the most of his time attacking everybody else. It's very hard to repair your image when that's been your MO.
Let me just put a really basic frame on what this race will look like to a lot of people in America. And there are many things Donald Trump has said, obviously, that have alienated some subgroups. But change versus more of the same. She's running as the third term of the Obama administration, broadly speaking, and he wants to blow up everything at a time when massive numbers of the people in the country think the country's on the wrong track, are incredibly frustrated at elites, establishments, et cetera. How do you defeat that frame?
Well,
change versus more of the same.
There are two things. First of all, the country being on the wrong track, which you guys know because we've talked about it, the numbers on wrong track were higher in 2012 when Barack Obama was reelected president, right? These things are choices. So, and I don't think it's as simple as change versus more of the same. I don't think that's the right construct. I think people feel like they've gotten to a certain point, they're not back where they want to be, and they want to know who can get stuff done that's going to make a difference in their lives. I always say presidential elections are about the future, not the past, and they're about their lives, not your life as a candidate. And I think when you look at who's talking most about the range of things that affect their lives, from creating good jobs, getting their kids education, bringing down college debt, Hillary Clinton is the candidate who happens to be winning more votes than anybody else at this point.
Among available voters in America right now, would you say that those voters are more pissed off now than they were 4 years ago, or less pissed off?
By available voters, you mean
not hardcore Democratic or Republican partisans. I mean, what the up for grabs voters that you guys will be competing for.
Yeah, I think they're probably a little less pissed off. I think they're frustrated with different things. I think the repercussions of the Citizens United case and what that's meant in terms of the spending and money on these races troubles them, which is also, I think, an advantage for us. Hillary Clinton was the first candidate in this election cycle to call for overturning it, appointing judges who would reverse it, and a constitutional amendment if that didn't happen. I think that's got people concerned more. Economically, I think people are still not where they want to be. I think they feel like they've figured out ways to make it work in their own lives. They're back a little bit closer to where they want to be, but they know they're not at that level of security they were before the economic crash. So they're going to want someone who's looking out for their interests, who'll make a difference in their lives, and will probably help, create a better future for them and their kids.
Your candidate's been ahead of Donald Trump, and with the exception of a few outliers, every national poll for months and months. Would you expect that to change at any point in the next several months before the conventions?
I don't. I think when you look at the reality of this situation and what's happening on the Republican side, even last night, whether you're talking about an array of tweets and commentary from establishment Republicans about their dissatisfaction here, including, the chief consultant for John McCain's race, Mitt Romney's race. You got people like Mitt Romney, people who've run before, Lindsey Graham. Their party is going to make this very difficult to change the numbers on that side of the equation for them. I think we have more swing voters. I think more states will be in play for us. I think a lot of the swing voters, John, that you were talking about a little bit, they're not just moderates ideologically, but they're modulated in their temperament. They don't like hyper-politics. And the hyper-politician in this race is a, Donald Trump character, not Hillary Clinton. She's a nose to the grindstone, get the work done, make a difference for you.
2008 and 2012, everybody in the Obama campaign would always say, we'd rather have our hand than their hand. First McCain, then
Yeah.
Romney, right?
Yeah.
What does Donald Trump have in his hand that you envy?
Well, there are a couple of things. He's an unconventional candidate. I'll be honest with you. I think what he has is that the media hasn't treated him like they treat a typical front runner for the nomination all the way through. And I'm not singling anybody out here, but you've even had people like Megyn Kelly on Fox criticize the media for letting him wallpaper the airwaves or phone into Sunday shows, things that were unprecedented. And I think his unconventionality has had the media off guard. I think now it's game time. And I think he's going to face the scrutiny and the questions that every other presidential
Anything else in his
candidate.
hand that you envy besides his ability to be unconventional?
Not right now. I don't think so.
How about his support with male voters?
No, I think, you know, there's a poll out today from CNN that shows Hillary Clinton running even among male voters. You know, I've got mixed views of public polls, but I think when you look
You don't have mixed views.
I was going to say mixed views. I can't believe you've come on this show and you're citing a public poll right now at the general election.
I'm just trying to preempt you. He brought him up first.
We're going to talk more to Joel Benenson in just a second, but we're going to take a little break now. Still monitoring John Kasich's withdrawal speech. Stay with us.
He brought it up.
We'll be right back.
Disgraceful.
I am a unifier. We're going to be a unified party.
He is a con artist.
A phony.
Donald Trump is the know-nothing candidate.
Donald is a bully.
The sign of deep insecurity and weakness.
The bullying, the greed, the misogyny, the absurd third-grade theatrics.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. A narcissist at a level I don't think this country's ever seen.
I bring people together.
We are on a Joel Benenson bender. We're back for round two with Joel Benenson, the chief strategist for Hillary Clinton's campaign. Joel, thank you for sticking around for another block. That web video was something that your campaign put out today, but just now, not on this camera. John Kasich has announced that he's suspending his campaign. Not a surprise. We heard this was going to come, but now it has come, so he is out of the race for all intents and purposes. I want to come back to what we were talking about when we left off before, which was Donald Trump. Your old friend David Plouffe, who ran the president's campaigns the last two times around, has said publicly, publicly a bunch of times that he'd be a little nervous about running against Trump for two reasons. One, that he's so unpredictable as a performer, and two, that he scrambles the map. So just talk about those two things and how you think about those two levels of unpredictability facing into the Trump general election.
I agree with David on the first one. I disagree on the second. I think the unconventionality, you asked me before, what do I think he has? I think he is unconventional. I think he has shown an ability to say outlandish things and, as I said, not get his feet held to the fire for it for some reason. Whether he can sustain that or not remains to be seen.
But do you not worry about that element, like getting into your candidate's head? Because one of the ways in which he's unpredictable is he will say things that no other candidate would ever say.
I think, Secretary Clinton did some interviews earlier today, and one of the things she said, 25 years, she's probably had more things said about her and at her than any other candidate who's ever been out there. I think she's got pretty thick skin. I think she knows when to respond, and I think she knows when not to respond. And I think that'll be a real key here. I think what you don't want to do is let Trump dictate the terms of the engagement. And I think she's going to be really good at that. On scrambling the map, that's where I disagree with. And David and I, are great friends. But I believe, in having looked at the map and going back to 2012 and 2008, that more states will be put in play for us that the Republicans will have to defend, notably North Carolina, which we've only won once out of the last 6 times, Georgia, Arizona possibly. I think states like that, they will have to defend with Donald Trump on their ticket. I don't see there's a state that they make us play defense in that we don't already compete aggressively in. If you want to talk about the Rust Belt, we're going to compete in the Rust Belt no matter who the candidate is.
Is John Kasich right that he would have been a stronger general election candidate than Donald Trump? And if so, by how much?
I got to tell you, I always say you can't look at primaries as a blueprint for the general election, but it's really hard to make a case that you'd be a better candidate when you're losing in your primaries, right? I mean, if you can't win in your own party, it makes it a whole lot harder to win beyond that. And I think this is the same is true on our side. Hillary Clinton's amassed 3 million more votes than Bernie Sanders, 285 or 86 pledged delegates. You have to be able to show you can win in your own party in order to translate in a general election. He certainly wouldn't carry the baggage that Donald Trump might carry with 5 years of unfavorable ratings, but he'd have a bigger climb up to define himself in a short amount of time. At this point, if he was the nominee, people still don't know who he is. And he's only got 6 months to go.
More or less than a 10% chance you lose this race.
Oh, I'm not going to do a percentage game with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think...
More or less than 10%.
That we lose this race?
What words would you use to describe your chances of losing?
I think we have a big structural advantage and a big advantage of candidate in Hillary Clinton who speaks to what people want in the next president of the United States.
Those are two good advantages, structural and candidates. Okay.
Yes.
Well, she managed to get out of here doing 2 blocks, and we didn't get to talk to you at all, or we failed to talk to you about Bernie Sanders and the nomination fight whatsoever. So you'll have to come back, and we can take that up with you shortly. You're great for being here, as always. Thank you for coming on the show. Coming up, a Ted Cruz ally and Republican strategist joins us here in that same seat that Joel's sitting. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can listen to us, too, on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back.
always said that the Lord has a purpose for me as he has for everyone. And as I suspend my campaign today, I have renewed faith, deeper faith, that the Lord will show me the way forward and fulfill the purpose of my life.
That was John Kasich speaking just moments ago in Columbus, Ohio. He did not mention Donald Trump in that speech. During Ted Cruz's farewell to the presidential race last night, he promised to keep fighting for the conservative cause, but pointedly did not mention the Republican Party. So joining us now to help decode Cruz's speech and much more is Kellyanne Conway, who ran a collection of pro-Cruz super PACs called Keep the Promise. Kellyanne, it's great to see you as always.
Thanks for having me.
So explain this to me. Ted Cruz, a genuine conservative, an outsider, anti-establishment, all of those things in a year when those things should have mattered a lot. How could he have failed? What's the explanation, the bottom line, why Ted Cruz could not defeat Donald Trump?
Well, I would argue that he succeeded over 15 other candidates, which in and of itself, if you're Ted Cruz and you have all the king's horses, all the king's men always against you, is success.
But did not defeat Donald Trump.
That's right. But I guess being in the Senate, even for 2.5 short years, as he was, is too much of an insider for an electorate that truly wants an outsider. When they say outsider, they mean somebody who's not part of the system. And if you're part of the system, it means you've raised money. It means you've been briefed by lobbyists at some point. You've been in hearings. You've cast votes that people don't like. And it is amazing, really, to think of people wanting an outsider, but wanting an outsider to be with no political experience whatsoever. I mean, that's a pretty remarkable feat. And we're old enough to remember that last summer, Ben Carson also was doing very well in the polls as a political outsider with zero experience in Washington, a world-renowned neurosurgeon. But I think that Trump was able to carry that narrative forward in places and among constituencies like evangelicals and like the non-college educated voters. That was quite surprising even to people like me. Why? Because he then was able to say, well, you're not just getting delegates on the weekend, you're rigging the system. You're part of a system that works against us. Donald Trump did a really smart thing early on. He locked arms with voters in a way that they felt when he was being attacked, they were being attacked. They really feel like they're part of a larger cause.
You've known Trump for a long time. Do you plan to support him now that your candidate's out of the race?
I do support him, and I hope others will as well, Mark. I'm part of the Never Hillary camp, and I'm really disappointed in some of my Republican colleagues and friends who have said that they'll support Hillary. I understand why others may not be willing yet to get on board with Donald Trump, but I'm a party girl, and I've been a party girl when we've had other nominees that were tough to swallow, who I didn't see as genuine conservatives.
Just big picture, what are the building blocks of Trump's comeback, if he has one, with female voters?
Several things. First of all, I think so much has been written about the, quote, gender gap that we should really avoid re-scrutiny of that. If he focuses on the issues that animate women, in the Bloomberg poll, in our polling, everybody's polling shows the economy still animates women. But what do women talk about when they say the economy? They really mean everyday affordability and long-term financial security. They mean the cost of food and fuel. They mean paying the tuition, the mortgage, the rent, and long-term financial security. I think Donald Trump should say about Hillary Clinton, you're going to improve the lot of women. You've been in public office for 30 years. You are a typical conventional politician who has improved her own status, her own wealth, her own power, and has done precious little to help women all across this country. I also think Donald Trump should force a two-way conversation on abortion with Hillary Clinton. That would really defang that issue. Say to her, who's really extreme here? Is it my party, the Republican Party, that believes a woman facing an unplanned pregnancy deserves our compassion and our support, and not our judgment and condemnation? Or is it you, Hillary Clinton, whose Democratic Party says abortion anyone, anytime, anywhere, no restrictions for partial birth abortion in the 8th and 9th month, for sex-selective abortion, which is exterminating the whole next generation of little girls, taxpayer-funded abortion, fetal pain abortion? If he forces a two-way conversation, I think you're dealing with wild card, unpredictable Donald Trump against fairly non-resilient, statist Hillary Clinton. That's a match I think we should all...
Is she the favorite, or is he?
She's the favorite because of the Democratic blue wall. But I actually think Donald Trump's point that he makes competitive some of these Rust Belt states and some of these states that were elusive to John McCain and Mitt Romney, very conventional establishment candidates in 2008 and 2012 against President Obama. I think he does put some of those voters in play. You look at what happened in Pennsylvania. He had thousands of Democrats and independents switching their registration to vote for him. That's not nothing. And I think that, coupled with Mrs. Clinton not being able to put away Bernie Sanders, including in these Rust Belt states, but not being able, they cleared the field for her. She still doesn't have the nomination. Donald Trump was the 17th out of 17 choices for lots of people at the beginning, and there he is, the nominee.
Kellyanne, we're going to have to leave it there until the next time you come back, which we'll enjoy as much as we did this time. So coming up next, the ghost of Ted Cruz's past and future. We have some reporters reporting for duty right after this.
Carson is lower energy than Jeb, if you want to know the truth.
He took a knife, and he went after a friend, and he lunged.
He's got a pathological temper or temperament.
But lo and behold, it hit the belt.
As an example, child molester.
And the knife broke. Give me a break.
Dr. Ben Carson endorsed me, and I want to tell you, that is an incredible man.
It's such an honor to have Ben. He's a friend. He's become a friend.
United States by insulting your way to the presidency.
Let's see, I'm at 42 and you're at 3, so far I'm doing better.
Doesn't matter.
He's a low-energy individual.
Let me talk. Quiet.
Look, Jeb's a loser. I wish him the best. Jeb was a very nice person.
You had Christie, the George Washington Bridge. He knew about it.
He was like a little boy. Oh, I'm with the president. Remember, he flew in the helicopter, and he was all excited to be in the helicopter.
Is he going to vote for Obama? I thought he was going to vote for Obama.
People in New Jersey want to throw him out of office.
Chris, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Chris Christie, who endorsed me, incredible guy.
This little guy has lied so much.
Here we go.
Little Marco. I'm watching Marco sweating like a dog on my right. They call him a robot.
It's Rubio.
I want to congratulate Marco Rubio on having run a really tough campaign. He's tough, he's smart, and he's got a great future.
Lion Ted.
He's a nasty guy. Nobody likes him.
Announced that he can't win by himself.
Nobody in Congress likes him. Nobody likes him anywhere once they get to know him.
He cannot do it. You know, he's a joker.
Very nasty guy.
Just so you understand, Ted Cruz, he is one hell of a competitor. He is a tough, smart guy.
See what I say? Now that he's out, everybody's nice. When they're out, they're nice. They ran a brilliant campaign.
So very true. That's Donald Trump before and after. Now for Reporter Roundtable Classic. Here with us from NBC News, Kelly O'Donnell and Casey Hunt. And in Washington, our colleague Sahil Kapoor in the Bureau. Thank you all for joining us. So you both have covered the Hill. Ted Cruz is going to go back and be United States Senator. What do you think that's going to be like for him?
Tough. I'm interested to see what Mitch McConnell has to say to him on his first day back at Senate lunches. I'm not sure how the room will react, but my guess is it will not be with a round of applause.
You covered him as a senator for so long. As a presidential candidate, what did he do that surprised you? Anything?
Well, I think that he brought a fierceness to it that we expected. The biggest surprise was exiting in the way that he did, as quickly as he did. A good judgment, I think, preserving his future. I don't know how he will try to mend fences when he goes back. He at times talks about the fact that he doesn't have bad relationships with people. He just doesn't know them very well. Well, now they all know him. And I think that he will have a tough argument after running against the Washington cartel. But I'm not sure it'll be a different experience for him, because he was pretty much a loner in the Senate, operating with basically only Mike Lee of Utah as a close friend. So I'm not sure his experience will change very much.
I want to ask all three of this question. I'm going to start with Sahil. Just answer me this. Like last night, Cruz's speech very much aimed towards the future. Cited Reagan, people talked about the Reagan analogy. We talked about the movement, clearly thinking about 2020, right? Is Ted Cruz the kind of guy who can last another cycle and be the next in line when 2020 comes around? Or is he Rick Santorum all over again?
John, it was an intriguing cliffhanger in Cruz's speech, and I think he's certainly thinking about it. He hinted at it in a way that other presidential candidates have not done. He also talked about the Ronald Reagan speech in 1976, obviously 4 years before he won. So he's drawing these analogs, and I think Ted Cruz is certainly thinking about that. He's built his ground operation. He's built it piece by piece, brick by brick. For 2020, he's still only 45 years old. He has 30 years to figure out how to be president, and I think there's a very good chance people certainly expect that he's going to try again in 2020.
One of the things that seems to me, the million things that Donald Trump broke this year, is broke the notion of Republicans as the party of primogeniture. So I mentioned Santorum, right? He was next in line. He was number 2 in 2012. He got to 2016. Not only did he not get the nomination, but was and also ran. So is Ted Cruz a guy who, as I asked Sahil, a guy who will be looked to by the Republican Party if Trump fails as the logical inheritor? Or will people look at him and go, man, let's just move on to something else here?
I think he intends to still be this voice for freedom, the Constitution, and so forth. But if you need the party to rely on, then he does not have the groundwork for that. Does he have the passion among a certain grassroots activist voter? Yes, he does. Will he have the organization? I think there is a strong case to make for that. But will the times be different then? Will there be a pendulum back to a more traditional next man up scenario in 4 years? It's hard to imagine that, but I think he wants to remain a national voice for sure.
Is there any way, given the things he said on Tuesday about Donald Trump, that he could end up supporting Donald Trump? There's another separate kind of question.
Look, I mean, I think his main problem here was the trust issue at the end of the day, right? And if you are playing back-to-back clips of what what Ted Cruz had to say about Donald Trump versus then him saying nice things about, I think that poses a real credibility problem for him if he wants to move forward. And I think the answer to your question is also the answer to what happens to this quote-unquote conservative movement, that all of the people who are opposing Trump and saying, you know what, he's not an economic conservative, he's not a national security conservative. Does that movement stay together in some cohesive way, and does Ted Cruz become the leader, and does it become clear after whatever we see through November that that movement is going to be the future of the party? I'm not sure any of those questions are answered at this point, or that it will be.
Sahil, except for Reince Priebus's tweet last night, there hasn't really been very many people prominent in the party today saying, time to circle around, time to close ranks. Do you expect that to happen in the coming days, or it's not going to happen until there's some other intervening event?
Mark, I think there are two categories of that. There are going to be some people who do come around, and we saw that with, for instance, North Carolina Senator Richard Burr, who's up for re-election in 2016, said unequivocally that he will support Trump. Then you have the Susan Collins brand, the most moderate Republican senator in the chamber, who said, yes, well, if Trump can stop saying sort of insulting things, then maybe I'll be able to support him. So I think you'll have the yeses, you'll have the maybes, and then you'll have the never Trump people like Ben Sass and Katie Packer and the ones who run these super PACs, who will simply not be able to get behind him. I don't know how big a number that is. The polls right now say somewhere between 20 to 23% in various states of Republicans say they won't support Trump. But President Obama had those same numbers in 2008 among Democrats, and they unified. So I think a lot can happen between now and November. A lot of it depends on how Donald Trump conducts himself. Is he going to give Republicans a reason to be able to say, yes, I can support him. He's not going to be, he's not going to have the sort of problems and not going to be the sort of incendiary candidate that we worry about. Then yes, I think we're going to see a major shift. But I think that's on Trump to convince people that he's the kind of candidate they can get behind.
Kelly, is there stuff Trump did to win the nomination in terms of tactics and his candidate skills that will be less effective or not effective as a general election candidate?
Well, I think that he has to prove a threshold of people seeing him on the world stage and seeing him as being more presidential. He has repeatedly given us all the sort of excuse that there's such a big field, I've got to be bold and over the top to deal with that. I think there's a different question now. Can he draw in voters that are beyond just Republican Party primary voters? That's a big group. And I think he's already saying he wants to do that by, I expect him to go into areas that are largely Latino or African American. I expect him to go into places where people might be surprised to see him campaigning, to try to say he is a different kind of candidate. He loves to lean on the fact, month by month, he's only been a politician for fill-in-the-blank months, that he wants to keep that difference about himself going forward. The blistering stuff will come against Hillary Clinton. I think he is excited to turn the corner and have a whole new list of branding nicknames that he will begin to unfurl for us.
You've covered the Stop Trump movement, which now is not what it was, doesn't have a candidate left.
Right.
Some people say, like we had Stuart Stevens on yesterday, he said, Romney's strategist, he said, I don't begrudge people who want to go work for Romney. Other people have said, you go work for Romney, you're off, you're on the enemy's list forever.
McCarthy moment.
Is this going to be a continuing feud within the Republican Party and divide people individually, and it's kind of two camps, those who went with Trump and those who don't?
I do think that there are going to be people within the Republican Party who keep score without question, but I think that there's too much at this point that's unsettled. And I think that while I'm hearing Democrats today talking like, frankly, Jeb Bush supporters were talking earlier in this race, which was that when we get to this general election and the voters actually have a chance to say their piece, they're going to reject this. They're going to realize this is crazy. This is never going to happen. Of course, look what happened to Jeb Bush. I think that we're going to be having potentially a very different conversation in the general election. And I think that, if Trump is able to consolidate this race in a way that right now seems maybe inconceivable to people, all will be forgiven. It almost always is in politics.
There is a survivor question, though, for electeds and staffers and so forth. I am hearing from people, if they support Trump by endorsing him at the elected level or go to work for him, more than one person has said, well, this hurt my career. That window is not yet closed about whether people feel they can move forward with him.
I want to ask you one last question, Kelly, because you are the veteran here, these two, Casey and Sahil, young people. Us, old people. We're college classmates. I know how old you are. You've seen a lot of campaigns come together. Trump is way behind on a lot of fronts. Doesn't have a fundraising operation, media, polling, targeting, field,
state
analytics, anything.
Yeah.
What's the hardest one to catch up in? What's the thing that is going to give him the biggest fits trying to get to level with Hillary Clinton in the next few months?
I think when you consider how on every policy level and programming level the Clinton team is ready, on every level of who they would put into a Trump transition to have all of those jobs already filled, in at least on paper, they are way behind on those things.
Okay. Sahil, Kelly, Casey, thank you all, and we'll be right back.
By now, because you're all intelligent people, you know that there are great stories up all the time on BloombergPolitics.com, including a fascinating piece by our colleagues Ben Brody and Andre Tartar about the accuracy of public polling in this cycle. Let's just not say it's totally great. Coming up, the polling that is, coming up on Bloomberg TV, Emily Chang speaking with the CEOs of Roe v. and TiVo, interestingly named companies, after their merger announcement. Until tomorrow, from Mark and I here at Bloomberg headquarters, we say to you, sayonara.
For Mark and me.
What?
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg West. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. John Kasich has officially ended his bid for the Republican presidential nomination. The Ohio governor made the announcement in Columbus.
And as I suspend my campaign today, I have renewed faith, deeper faith, that the Lord will show me the way forward and fulfill the purpose.
Kasich did not mention, nor did he endorse frontrunner Donald Trump, who is now the GOP's presumptive nominee. A huge wildfire has destroyed entire neighborhoods and forced the evacuation of Fort McMurray in western Canada. The city is home to the Alberta oil sands, the third largest reserves of oil in the world behind Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. The Environmental Protection Agency is accused of being almost 30 years late in issuing rules for the handling of wastewater from oil and gas exploration. Environmental groups suing the agency are seeking a court order compelling the EPA to adopt measures regulating the disposal. The Transportation Security Agency is adding more screeners and bomb-sniffing dogs to congested airport hubs. It's in response to estimates of massive security lines this summer. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by our 2,400 journalists in more than 150 news bureaus around the world. I'm Mark Crumpton.
Chang, and this is Bloomberg West. Coming up, investors shift Tesla shares into higher gear as the company reports a narrower than expected loss in quarterly earnings. This as two top executives leave. We'll break it all down. Plus, the beats go on at Apple, the tech giant changing the tune of its